It was 7:30 p.m. on a Thursday, and Lauren and I had just put our 4 daughters to bed. And we were sitting down watching Dave Chappelle's recent special on Netflix. And in between my thigh-slapping laughs, I had a really deep epiphany. If I die, how do I best make sure my wife, my daughters, my entire family is taken care of? Now, Dave nearly gets assaulted at one of his shows, and his wife is distraught knowing that the threat to his life that really could have been. If you had died tonight, me and the kids would have had nothing, is what Dave's wife said to him. And then Dave reaches into his pocket and pulls out some keys and said, "Those are the keys to my safety deposit box. God forbid anything happens to me, you and the kids have everything you need in that box." Do you know, this bitch looked in the box while I was alive and well, says Dave as the crowd erupts into laughter. "God damn it, David, I opened the box," says Dave's wife. His joke book was the only thing inside of the safety deposit box. And Dave says, "Well, sweetie, look, if you tell those jokes exactly how they're written, you and the kids should be fine." Now, it could have been the THC that I took before turning the comedy special on, but after I stopped laughing, I started thinking, how do I ensure my family are taken care of? What is it that I'm leaving actually behind helps my daughters live their best lives? And what is my work that makes me feel like this is a life worth living? And one question that's been gnawing at me for years, what is my life philosophy? And hell, what even is a life philosophy? And so I'm sitting here glancing over at my bookshelf, crammed with books by everyone from ancient philosophers to modern day thinkers. My Apple iNotes, my Google Drive are overflowing with notes from everything that I've read, everything that I've listened to, that I've obsessed over. I've even spent 18 months with a personal mentor diving deep into as many schools of thought that I could actually get my hands on, from animism to today's thought leaders. And it has been a full-on obsession. And whenever I could spare time from running my businesses, I'd read ancient wisdom texts or attend lectures trying to decode what all of this stuff is meant, and more importantly, how to actually use it as well. And so to me, a life philosophy isn't about dropping quotes or being some armchair philosopher who can talk the talk. It's about having a lens in which to view the world, a perspective that helps me to be able to make better decisions and to live effectively a good life. But the thing is, it's not about just having one lens. It's about knowing when to switch lenses and when to take them off, and when to combine a few of them to get a clearer picture of what life is. And the real power in all of this is knowing that you can actually change who you are. Because let's face it, we're all a bit like characters in our own story where we partially make up ourselves. Our minds are biased, we're stubborn, we're pretty damn good at convincing ourselves that we are the hero, we are the center of the sat-nav. And the kicker really is that our sense of self is hugely influenced by our memories. But where it gets really interesting is our brains are wired to make sure that we look good in our own story, even if that means that we're tweaking the details a little bit or a lot of it. And it's like our brains are doing a little bit of mental gymnastics, rewriting our memories that fit our narrative, where we come out on top. And while that might sound a little bit shady, it's actually incredibly empowering. Now, psychologists Carol Travers and Elliot Aronson have pointed out that some of the most significant memory distortions are those that just help justify and explain our lives. Our memories become a tool for self-justification, a way to excuse our mistakes, our failings, so that we keep believing that we are the hero that we think we are. And so, in a way, our brains are master storytellers, spinning seductive lies that make us feel better about ourselves. While this is a bit of a mind bender for me at the start, understanding it gave me the ability to rewrite our story, to change who I am, to become the person that I truly want to be. And the world is not made of atoms. The world is made of stories. And this is to say that I sat there watching Dave Chappelle crack jokes about life and death, and I realized that the stories we tell ourselves are the ones that leave behind what really matters. And that moment between the laughs, the deep introspection, was a wake-up call for me. Now, I'll be the first one to admit, I know Dave Chappelle. I have zero comedic timing, and my joke book wouldn't get me very far with my family. But what I do have are the lessons that I've learned from a lifetime of trial and error. And these are lessons that help me build a life that, despite all the messiness of mistakes I've gone to, I'm honestly genuinely proud of today. And through all of those mistakes, the accidental right decisions, and the roller coasters of the highs and the lows, I managed to distill my experiences into something more practical and valuable. And I've boiled it down to one model, two frameworks, and three philosophies. And that's what I want to share with you, because this is not just theory. For me, this is the practical, real-world stuff that helped me along the way. And so the model for me is finding clarity in chaos. And so I'm either going to drop dead way before the average life expectancy, or I have kickstarted my midlife crisis a hell of a lot earlier than what should have been. Because for me, the existential angst that had me feeling like an absolute freight train, and where I suddenly found myself grappling with these profound questions in my early 30s, questions such as like, what is the meaning of life? What's the nature of reality? What is consciousness? What is the nature of good and evil? What happens after death? What does it actually mean to be a good human? How do I actually live my best life? And this is where I plunged into philosophy, starting with Buddhism, which quickly led me to Stoicism. But then as I read more, I had more questions than the actual answers that I had. And the threads that I was really pulling on to try and get some clarity, they weren't actually getting me any clarity. And where I wanted to be able to argue both sides of the argument, which really mean I wanted to be able to be deeply versed in the subject matter. I wanted to actually understand it rather than just regurgitating what somebody else said. I don't want to be parroting somebody else's ideas. And that's whenever I tried to explain what I was learning to somebody else, initially it sounded robotic, like I was reading a script, like I was recounting like my times tables. And that's where I had to get a better handle on this, which is why I hired a private philosophy mentor where we began weekly sessions. And I remember in our first session, I laid everything out. I go, I want you to teach me and open up to the world of different philosophical schools and the teachings to show me how to actually figure this stuff out. And the good news was that clearly I wasn't the only one wrestling with all of these big questions. Because at first, the eightfold part of Buddhism, the four agreements of the Toltec wisdom, the Tao Te Ching, the Sermon of the Mount, the Yoga Sutras, the six perfections, the way of the warrior, the Bhagavad Gita, the Four Noble Truths, the ethics of Confucius seemed like they were all separate threads. But as I actually started to understand this stuff, it started to come together. So as I stepped back to see the bigger picture, I realized that these teachings were actually weaving together. And each of them actually started to offer their own unique take, their own unique language, their own unique perception. So the Eightfold Path focused on the ethical and the mental development that resonates deeply with the Yoga Sutras and the guidance towards the physical, the mental, and spiritual harmony. So both of those frameworks, they highlight the importance of the right actions and mindfulness, aiming to be able to free us of suffering and illusions. The four agreements, the counsel for here is how to be able to be impeccable with our word, how to have honesty, integrity, and dedication to how we show up. And so for these, they remind me of our words and the actions, that they shape our reality to give us what is really honor and intention to cultivate a fulfilling life. The Tao Te Ching, the principles of the Wu Wei, the effortless action, finds a powerful echo to the Christian Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus advocates for humility, forgiveness, and love. Now, both teachings are very different. Now, the Taoist pursuit of simplicity and humility, they also parallel with the Buddhist cultivation of things such as the generosity of the six perfections, aiming to dissolve the ego and foster a profound sense of connectedness and inner peace. The Bhagavad Gita calls to balance the worldly duties and the spiritual growth that really sounds like, well, at least to me, Confucius' emphasis on social harmony and moral virtues. Things such as duty, devotion, selfless action, the things such as righteousness, benevolence, and proper behavior. These teachings stress that our individual actions contribute to a larger social fabric. And it sounds a little bit too highfalutin, but that's where it's coming from. And so for me, I was like, why do these schools of thought resonate more deeply than with certain individuals? And I think it's because the answer lays in the diverse paths to having an understanding, the fulfillment, and ultimately enlightenment, if that word actually vibes with you at all. I mean, if it doesn't, that's perfectly fine. But at the same time, there was another yearning for ethical clarity. And so for me, where there are such things as the four agreements, for the steadfast I'll take that a little bit out. How does this actually help me? But with all of this, it really just comes down to how does this actually help me live a better life? So before we go any further with this, because I know all of this can sound just a bit too, like just right over the top of the head, because it did for me for so long. As for much of the time when I was trying to learn this stuff, there was a certain level of mental gymnastics trying to sound like the smartest guy in the room. And it's been more about how figuring out how do I live a life with less stress? How do I bounce back from depression? How do I actually be a better father, a better husband, a better friend? And where at first I was on a mission to find the answer to all of this elusive stuff, the theory of everything, but all that did was really just leave me eventually feeling just like I was running around on a fool's errand. It's about finding the right lens to help me live in my current chapter of my life. And the key is not clinging to it with an iron grip, but knowing when to actually let go and swap it out for something else that better serves me. Because in the end, these philosophical teachings aren't isolated silos. They're interwoven threads with each other. And that's why one thing will resonate with one person and why another thing will resonate with another person and why we will change as we continue on with lives. Because they remind me that despite our different journeys, our life core questions, our aspirations, seeking truth, living ethically, finding harmony, these are universal with all of us. So I started to see that these philosophies, kind of like Lego blocks, probably shows I'm a little bit of a meathead, but this is the way I kind of figured it out. Because once I could finally start piecing them together, I could better start defining them, but then I could better start actually applying and integrating them into my life as well. And this is where I kind of brought them into 5 distinct parts. There was ethical living, there was mindfulness and presence, there was purpose and duty, there was self-improvement and wisdom, and then there was compassion and community. So for me, ethical living ethically, at least for me, is about trying to embody integrity, compassion, respect in everything that I do. Now, I know it's going to sound like a mouthful, as even it sounds like a mouthful as I'm saying it right now, but the more I dig into this stuff, the more I realize the ideas such as the Eightfold Path right action is all about ethical conduct. And there's the 4 agreements advice to be impeccable with our word and always to do what is our best. These are the principles that push me to act honorably and honestly. But I got to be real, I haven't always nailed this. And again, I don't want to try and perceive this. I am a work in progress. And I believe I always will be as well. Because there was a time when I faced a really tough business decision. And it would have been easy for me to take the shortcut. But luckily, I actually was learning this stuff and I was actually trying to use this stuff. And I remembered that these teachings were about living ethically. And it's not just about me. It's about contributing positively to the world around me. And these decisions, as frustrating as it really was, made me realize that sticking to my values is worth it. And because I sleep better at night because of it. And after a grounded life philosophy should just do that. It's going to help you sleep like a brick because you're in integrity. And that's why, because there's mindfulness and presence as a second, mindfulness has become this really non-negotiable part of my daily routine. But it's not this usual mindfulness that everybody else is really talking about. It's a bit of a fad right now. For me, mindfulness, to be mindful, is so that I can then investigate. It's so that I can be knowing what is actually going on, how am I actually showing up, but then why is that actually happening? How do I actually do better moving forward? Because I'm ashamed to admit that I found myself in the middle of making love to my wife, and there my mind was thinking about everything that I hadn't accomplished and stressing about the next day's to-do list. I can't believe I'm even saying this on video, but it's true, because I then only find myself having performance anxiety, only trying not to lose my erection. But instead of letting it take over, I was able to catch, not always, sometimes, catch myself in that moment and let go of that mental clutter. And so when I brought myself back to the presence, I was then able to let that anxiety fade, but I was able to actually, dare I say, enjoy the moment as well. But then the third part was purpose and duty. And I'll say this from myself as a man in this chapter of my life right now. Finding and fulfilling my purpose is a journey. And I find that it's deeply shaped how I actually live my life. As I've struggled to be able to turn the pages of books like the Bhagavad Gita, where I had to go through it multiple times just to be able to do it. I'd get through pages of it and then realize I'd have to go back and start again. And this is where I started to discover and thinking about was our dharma and our duty, because it taught me to align my actions with a higher purpose of what it is that I'm actually wanting to do, with what felt right for me. Because each day felt like this rinse and repeat from the day before. And I was just losing the love for the process of waking up every day. I was losing the love of the process of just being a dad, being a husband, running the businesses. It felt like Groundhog Day, and it was a shitty feeling. But by embracing this, I found that my life has taken on more meaning, and by actually being able to find out what am I contributing to be able to do something positive to the world. Because then that goes into the self-improvement and the wisdom, where self-improvement and the pursuit of wisdom has been this thing that I've really enjoyed, something I've just naturally wanted to be able to do, that I think we're all naturally wanting to do as well. And that's where sometimes it can be too much. Listening to too many podcasts, watching too many videos, reading too many books, essentially mentally masturbating, trying to just consume so much. And instead, I was needing to be able to find peace, being able to get away from this self-help junkie feeling, to be able to actually do something about it. And there's been times where I thought that I'd just been able to figure all of this out, only to realize I was just completely off track as well. That what I've learned from it was that the personal growth isn't just about hoarding knowledge. It's about actually becoming a better version of myself, someone more in tune to who I really am in the world around me. Because if I'm real with myself, this is the work in progress. But as I'm starting to see that the real journey isn't just about consuming more, it's about applying what I've actually learned, living it out, and giving myself as well the time and the space to grow at my own pace as well. Because much of the time I could look at somebody else and I'm comparing myself. And that's where the fifth part was compassion and community. So for a long time, I was chasing success that was just about like ticking off achievements, because I thought that success was what I was supposed to do, because I was comparing myself to others. And then when I really started to understand community, it felt like something would actually like slow me down essentially. But the further I got down that road, the more I realized that something was missing. No matter how much that I had achieved, it felt like there wasn't enough. And that sense of fulfillment that I was chasing was just always just out of reach. I could never get it no matter what I actually achieved, no matter how much money I was making, no matter how good the business was or any of that stuff. As I began to shift my focus from just achieving to actually connecting to something profound, this is when I started to actually build a stronger, more meaningful relationships for the first time. And that's where I started to have that sense of belonging, where I realized that by embracing community, I was tapping into something much bigger than myself, that was a part of myself. The fulfillment that I'd been chasing through individual success was there waiting for me, only in the bonds of actually building with others. And so letting go of that constant need to achieve actually opened me up to a kind of richness of life that I didn't even know was possible. It taught me that true success isn't about what I accomplished on my own, but it was more about the relationships that I nurture and the community that I am able to contribute to. It's those connections that make life meaningful, because I'm not perfect. I'm far from it. I'm still figuring all of this stuff out, one Lego block at a time. But if there's one thing I've learned from trying to figure all this stuff out, it's true. If there is one thing that I've learned from trying to figure all this stuff out, it's that we're all in this together. And as much as our egos don't want to hear this, life is a team sport, because centuries worth of wisdom have boiled down to an analogy involving Lego blocks. Maybe I'm just a total nutcase right now that I have not gotten it right, and you can tell me in the comment section, but I feel like at times I've stumbled onto something that's actually helping me show up as a better person and not overcomplicate this crazy thing that we call life. And only time's going to tell if I've actually gotten this stuff even half right, because the framework of what I've been able to put together was addition through subtraction. And this is where the younger me used to really think about I could get everything done at once. Like some kind of multitasking warlord, I'd be able to go out and be able to get through my checklist, my to-do list every single day. And sure, there are times that I've been able to put my head down and I can just like run through walls and get stuff done. But that doesn't get me to where I ultimately want to go. That was an immature way for me to get some level of success. And eventually it really did hit me that I was just going about it all wrong. My priorities were completely out of whack. I was focused on doing everything instead of actually focusing on what mattered. So now when I feel that familiar overwhelm starting to creep back into my life, when I'm confused or I'm just feeling just plain frustrated, I fall back to the framework that kept me grounded as a father of 4 daughters and a husband and a guy trying to essentially work on this, which is do less, do it better, do it with love. That's what keeps me sane and helps me keep my priorities straight. Do less doesn't mean slacking off. It means cutting through the noise and focusing on what really matters. So when I choose to start focusing on calming the situation with myself or with whatever situation I'm in, with business or with family, I feel like then I can go, all right, how do I then do it better? Because doing it better is about quality over quantity. Because if I'm going to tackle something, whether it's a business project or just helping my daughters find their missing shoe, I want to do it right. And that is where it really comes down to I wasn't multitasking in that present moment, or I'm mentally checking out at the same time. I can be that present, fully engaged, and be able to do whatever I'm doing and doing it properly. Because when I then do it with love, this one ties everything all together. Because stressful situations can get completely blown away from this. Because whether I'm prepping for a big meeting or whether I'm braiding my daughter's hair, I try to approach it with a sense of care and love. Because this framework is not about productivity. This is about living in a way that actually feels right. It's about making sure that what I do matters and that I'm doing it well and I'm doing it with love. Because in the chaos of everyday life, this approach brings a sense of peace and fulfillment that you just can't get from cramming more in to your plate. It's how I stay sane, grounded, and most importantly, connected to the people that are most important to me. And this is where it comes to next, the framework of turning conflict into connection. Because I've spent 37 years stumbling through life, not knowing and not using nonviolent communication. And I know it's a terrible name, but you stick with me for a second because it's been a game changer for me. Because once I started using it, I realized that things were so much easier, more peaceful, and just downright I could be more effective as well. Because this NVC is about a manual to relationships that I didn't even know that I was missing. So let me share a story with you about nonviolent communication. See, a while back, I was with my wife and we were having one of those frustrating moments that could have really just blown down to a full argument, and where we had planned up to meet up at home after a long day, something I was actually really looking forward to. I got home on time and she was running a little bit late, and not just a few minutes late, it was 20 minutes late. Now, the old me would have just jumped straight into judgment, thinking she doesn't respect my time. Why is she doing this? Why can't she ever be on time? But instead, luckily, really luckily, I paused and I remembered the actual first step of nonviolent communication, which is observation. And so with observation, the key here is to describe what you see without adding your own spin, or really important, without adding your own judgment to it. So instead of thinking she's being inconsiderate, I said, when I see you arrive 20 minutes late for our meeting, ... I can then go on. So it's simple, it's factual, like a video camera recording the event. Take your judgment out of it. Because next is having your feelings. This is where I had to get real with myself and how I was feeling without blaming her for it. So I continue. I'm feeling frustrated and anxious. Now, I don't know about you, but admitting I'm feeling something like frustration can be tough. And it's way easier to point the finger at somebody else rather than me owning how I'm actually feeling and communicating that honestly as well. Because then you go on to your needs, which is when we get to the heart of the matter, your needs is where I then had to dig deeper to figure out what was actually really bothering me. Because why did I get triggered by her being late? Why was I so pissed off about it? And this is where the magic happens. Because instead of just unloading my feelings and needs, I made it clear. I made a doable request. Would you be willing to call me if you're going to be more than 10 minutes late? And so that's completely different to the bullshit I would have said before. And by actually just using these couple of steps without just blowing my gasket and completely not communicating properly, I was able to do something within like a 30-second just diarrhea that was simple for my wife or anyone to understand, that then was actually productive for us to be able to live together and to be able to do something really easily. Now, when I find myself in a sticky situation, I run through these steps: observations, feelings, needs, requests. And I just drill that into my head: observations, feelings, needs, requests. Because it's not always easy. And a lot of the time, I was going to say sometimes, a lot of the time, old habits are going to want to kick back in. But the big shift was actually being able to have that perspective change. And I think that's where it really hit home, especially in my marriage. When conflicts come up, it's not about seeing each other as the problem against each other. It's actually about being together and being able to solve the problem together as well. So let's talk about the philosophy. And for me, the philosophies that have best helped myself, and the first one is be first. Because being first for me is about stepping up, taking full responsibility for myself, and not waiting around for someone else to show me the way, or them having to give me permission to then do the right thing. So there's no more excuses. There's no more looking for others for validation. It's all on me when I take on this philosophy of be first. And so for the mantra that I keep close to myself is, Chris, don't be foolish. Because being foolish to me is knowing the right thing to do, but lacking the strength of character to actually follow through with it. And let me tell you, nothing stings me more in those moments when I fall short and I know that I feel foolish. It's a gut punch, a real blow to the ego, because I expect better of myself. Just the way that I frame it, you lack the strength of character to do the right thing. I feel like a kid that's just done the wrong thing and getting I feel shame upon myself. And when I do that, I know that I should be better. So in those moments is when I remind myself that true character isn't about knowing what's right. It's about having the guts to act on it. It's about holding myself accountable and keeping myself integrous no matter what's actually going on around me. Because in the end, that's where it's genuine. That's where genuine respect really comes from doing what's right, not just what's easy. Because life's too short to play the waiting game. And if I want something done, if I want to live in a certain way, or I believe in a particular cause, I can't just wait around for someone else to take the lead. I've got to be the one to step up. I've got to set the standard. I've got to lead by example. Because I've learned the hard way, especially when it comes to taking care of my family, my friends, my businesses. I can't afford just to sit back and hope things will just work themselves out. I have to be proactive. I have to make tough calls. And sometimes I have to take some risks as well. But for me, it's about being the catalyst for doing the right thing. Being first isn't just about making decisions. It's about embodying the values in which I hold dear to myself. And that's whether it's either uncomfortable or inconvenient, that doesn't matter. It's about having the courage to be able to stand up and to be able to believe that you can follow through and then actually follow through with it. Now, the next philosophy that I use is what I call from me to we. And it's where it's all about being a part of something bigger, something that I really fall back in and I say life is a team sport. Because it's not just about us as individuals or a string of disconnected events. It's about recognizing that everything and everyone is intertwined in this intricate web. If that sounds a little bit too woo, that's cool. But just stick with me for a second, because our actions, our choices, even our our existence is part of a larger whole, affecting all of us, not just ourselves, but everyone around us. And I used to think that life was about chasing my goals and focusing on what I needed to do. But the more I lived, it was more I realized that my well-being isn't actually just about me. It's about the people I interact with, the environment that I'm in, and the community that I'm a part of. Because the next philosophy is the power of reframing. As I am a little embarrassed that me putting together this episode took me over 7 weeks. As I was putting this together, I was about to share with you something that I've just really messed up. As last night, I came home from a really long day. I was just in a terrible mood. I was just a crankpot, to be honest. You know, the kind where everything that could go wrong did, and then some more on that. And I was pissed off about this domino effect of everything that just went compoundingly wrong during the entire day. And then to top it off, I knew that tomorrow I was going to be more of the same, because I had to deal with a bunch of stuff this morning before coming here and recording this for you. And so there I was, venting to my wife like I was a 5-year-old who just had his favorite toy taken away. And me jumping up and down and saying, I have to do this, I have to do that. And I grumbled words with his just spilling out like a broken record, just complaining. And then I heard myself say, I have to. And there it was. There was that immature, childlike version of myself having a full-on tantrum because I wasn't doing what I thought was more fun or more fulfilling. And I wasn't just mad at myself. I was resisting the reality of not every day is going to be this highlight exceptional reel. I had a problem with having a problem. And that's when I realized I needed to hit the brakes and reframe this whole damn situation of me just acting like a child. And this is where these series of events change. I needed to reframe the way that I was looking at it, because just the reframing of it got me to then realize of the situation I was in. Firstly, realizing that I had a problem with having a problem. That's a stupid thing. We're going to have problems all the time during life. That's simply natural. But then being able to say, why did I have the problem? How do I actually act? Does this really matter in the full context of everything else? And that's where the truth is, no, it did not matter at all. When I talk about reframing, I'm not just tossing around some feel-good jargon. I'm talking about consciously and deliberately choosing to meet every twist and every turn, every setback with resilience and responsibility. Because let's face it, no one has ever built a meaningful life living an easy life. The truth is, adversity isn't just inevitable, it's essential. And for me, this mindset is beautifully captured in Rumi's poem, The Guest House, where Rumi reminds us that every emotion, every experience is a visitor into our lives. This being a human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. Joy, sorrow, anger, frustration, each one is a guest. And each of its own job is for us to welcome them all, even if they're just dragging mud across our carpet. Because Rumi teaches us not just to shut the door on these visitors, but to greet them with open arms, to open and to learn from them, and to be actually have them a part of our lives. Because if we're real with ourselves, it's easy to hear all of this and just sounds like it's a bit too soft or a bit too passive. But there's nothing passive about embracing your fate or greeting every experience like an honored guest. Because it takes guts, it takes grit, and it's about facing the lives in all of the storms with your feet firmly planted on the ground and being able to say to it, is this all you've got? Because when that storm passes, because it always does, you're standing there stronger, wiser, and more ready than ever to be able to take on what comes next. And so when I was able to reframe everything from last night, I was able to wake up this morning with a different attitude, not one of just resignation, but a little bit more of determination, as I wanted to be able to actually show up here properly, do everything that I needed to this morning with my business, and being able to show up as a person that I'm actually proud of, that I admire. Because for me, that's when it makes all the difference. Because we can often so easily get caught up with the daily grind and the tasks that we dread to be able to do and the mistakes that we don't want to make, because we all have that choice in how we respond to whatever life brings us. Life isn't going to hand us this smooth ride on a silver platter every single day. Because to be honest, where's the fun in that? It's all the bumps, it's the detours, it's the plateaus that actually shape who we are. And they're the moments that when we get to decide, do we let them break us or do we use them to build ourselves up?